Hey, Julie.
Hey
So
there.
good to see you today. You guys, I am so excited to bring Julie on today because we have met through coaching and have really enjoyed getting to know each other over the last few years and have found lots of common ground that we enjoy discussing. And so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Julie, and then we're going to get started with our chat today. So Julie is a life coach who enjoys helping people understand who they are and how they contribute to the world around them. She enjoys using the enneagram as a framework for understanding and equipping people with tools they need to live joy-filled lives. And I just love that description. It suits you so well, Julie. It really
Thank
does.
you. Yes. Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. You know, one of the things that you and I have talked about over the years is story work and
Mhm.
how important it is with mental
Mhm.
health, healing. And I would love for you to just share a little bit about your thoughts about that.
Okay. Yes. So I have loved coaching, and what coaching really gave me is a container to define what I have loved and had been doing for years. I just didn't know to call it that. And so, what coaching does in real time is creates a space where someone can slow it down because we have so many thoughts on autopilot, and we have family and job and responsibilities, and we can just wake up at the end of the week and we've checked off boxes of responsibilities, and yet we've been on autopilot. And then we're frustrated, we're feeling shame or blame, or feeling like, is this all there is? And so when in coaching, it just slows it down, and then we can take captive every thought and make sure that those thoughts that are really driving the way we are living our life are really true to who we are and who we want to be. And so a key piece of that then is your story. And so my story and your story are going to be different.
Mhm.
And um, I do think it's really important. Um, It is Adam Young who introduced me to this quote, but this quote is not Adam Young's. But he said, the past isn't over. It's not even the past.
Mhm.
And so the way that you take your wiring, just how you came into the world and how you're going to process things, and then you layer into that your story, and then you have a reason for why you behave the way that you do. And
Mhm.
so when I believe you know why, then you can really decide to do something different about that. And so you take inventory. I do like this piece. I'm not sure I like this piece, but I think our past story, it doesn't define us,
Mhm.
right? It doesn't define us, but it absolutely does inform us.
Mhm.
And then we can take the rightful place of being a part of a redemptive story in our own life. And I think most of the time people will say it's their circumstances
Mhm.
that are really driving the discomfort and in their life. And so I would have agreed with that. And
Mhm.
I would have been able to list all the circumstances that make me think something.
Yes.
It wasn't until I realized I'm actually responsible for the thoughts
Mhm.
around that. And
Mhm.
it circumstances are important. It's not
Mhm.
that they don't matter, they do.
Mhm.
But the way that we think about them really does determine our life.
I agree. That is so well said. I love the way that you articulated that beautifully. And I agree with you 100%. I love that thought too about how our past does not define us, it informs us.
Hmm.
Love
Hmm.
that. And
Hmm.
how we use that informing, it's going to kind of help direct our future. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think too, it gives people a real sense of empowerment,
Mm.
that they really do have. They're empowered to make different choices. think different things and then experience
Mhm.
maybe the same thing in a totally different way, just
Yeah.
based on the way that their mind is processing all of it.
Mhm.
There's another quote I've really loved, and unfortunately, I don't know the author of it, but the quote is, the eyes see what the mind says.
Mm.
And so, I mean, you did let the cat out of the bag. I sure do love the Enneagram. And uh, a wonderful metaphor for the Enneagram is there's 9 ways of seeing the world. And um, we have lens on our viewpoint of the world. And that lens, I think, is informed by your worldview. It's informed by your past experiences and what you
Mhm.
made them mean. And it's very much informed by your Enneagram. And so you and I can be in the same place and see the exact same thing and see it so differently. And so we were we were designed to live in community, right? So there's really beauty in being surrounded by people who are different than you and see the world differently than you. But
Mhm.
also to really take advantage of community, you have to be responsible and accountable for your own viewpoint. So,
That's beautiful too. Very good. I love these perspectives so much. And yes, I definitely want you to share your thoughts there about the Enneagram and how it ties into, like, I know your perspective on it is coming to it from a place of a Christian perspective. And I know
mhm.
there's people that kind of sometimes question that a little bit, but you have studied it so deeply and can definitely, I feel like, shed light there. Can you do that a little bit for us? Like the Christian perspective of the Enneagram?
Yes. So the Enneagram has really been around a long, long, long time. In pop culture, it got some recent steam. So it feels new if you'd never heard about it, but it actually had been around for a very long time. And originally, it was intended to be an oral tradition. And so that very much goes against the way in 2024 we like to do things. We want digitally take a test, get an answer. This is my description, and move on.
Mhm.
Um, but what I found in studying the Enneagram is it's more than just here's a description of you. They're baked into it as a path of growth.
Mhm.
And um, so that's what was interesting to me about it. You can Google Enneagram and you will have immediate hits of lots of people who are
Mhm.
talking about it. I did get concerned early on that it might not be lining up with a worldview that I have. And so after some deep dive, there's origins that it has been around for a very, very, very long time with
Mhm.
people who are very disciplined in the faith. Um, and then other people have written about it, and maybe they don't share the same worldview that I do. Um, but there's a great phrase that has helped me much in this world is eat the fish, leave the bones.
Yes, I remember you were the one I heard say that first, and I love
And
it.
there is tremendous fish here. There
Yeah.
really is. And what I've seen it as, it's the Enneagram itself is not a religion. It's a tool. It's a
Mhm.
framework.
Exactly.
And it has allowed me to, number one, understand myself, which I really wanted to start it so I could understand people around me. But if you
Mhm.
don't understand yourself, then understanding folks around you is fruitless. So I began to really understand myself and then began to understand the world around people around me. And what I've gained from it is compassion
Mm.
and empathy,
Yeah.
and also a need to let someone, or excuse me, the ability to let someone be who they are. I don't need to change them.
Right.
And so there's an inner peace that comes with that.
Yes.
Also has really made me understand the story that God is writing in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I just have a lot of inner peace and comfort from there. So, but there is a caveat. There's plenty of people out there who don't see the world the way that I do. And but it has given me a path for growth, a deeper understanding of who God is. I have seen redemption in it, and it has made me love people in a deeper way. And
Mhm.
so those things hit the marks for me, personally.
Yeah.
And I was first exposed to it under the teachings of Suzanne Stabile, and
Mhm.
she is affectionately known in the world as the Enneagram Godmother.
Oh.
And I love listening to her interview people. I've also really loved the teachings of her husband, Joe Stabile.
Mhm.
And so that's really where I got started in it. And then once I became interested, it's just like in coaching.
Mhm.
When you start paying attention to something, then it's everywhere. And so
Yes.
that was true for me. So there's another author that I really enjoyed. Her name is Marilyn Vansell, and she has a book called Self to Lose, Self to Find.
Yes.
And I love the way that she um, um, presented it and created a framework in it. So those have been two really important people in terms of me understanding the Enneagram.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I love those resources too, because I know we were privileged to get to hear her speak and
Yeah.
be interviewed. And that was such an enlightening. And she definitely comes from the worldview that we share as
Mhm.
well. So I loved that
Absolutely.
perspective. One of the things you just said about how you feel like the Enneagram is a tool, there are so many tools that we use through
Mhm.
coaching. I mean, in life in general, but then, when we get specifically talking about coaching, there's so many tools that we use. And I think that component specifically of using it to help you understand yourself and others is so beautiful, because you and I were talking recently about how important it is, that relationship that we have with ourself. And so if you can use the Enneagram as a tool to help to clarify, okay, and to improve that relationship, it's going to affect all of your relationships around you. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And so within the Enneagram, once you do determine your number,
Mhm.
and that is a process of elimination, and it
Right.
is there's study that's required.
Mhm.
Then with your number, you're going to have a high side, an average, and then a low side. And so um, with that, there are certain things that maybe, well, let me back up. The Enneagram is looking at your motive,
Okay.
okay? Your motivation for why you're doing what you're doing. Now, I'm not privy to your motivations. I really look at your behavior,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So sometimes my motive and my behavior don't line up. It can
Mhm.
be confusing,
Right.
right?
Right.
So one thing we're not supposed to do this, but it's hard not to once you do begin to understand the Enneagram is to not type people. But at the end of the day, I really can't know why you're doing what you're doing. You have to tell me. But I want you to think about, I'm judging my own self based on my motives,
Mhm.
but I'm judging you based on your behavior. And so
Mhm.
there can be a very big disconnect there. And so the Enneagram, I think, gives us language to realize that sometimes those motives and behaviors don't match up.
That's a great explanation of how that internal get basically the internal versus the external, right? Of
Right,
how it's playing out in our relationships and how we
right,
perceive ourselves, how we perceive others.
right. And when I am in average space in Enneagram language, I'm really just operating out of my flesh,
Mhm.
honestly. And but when I'm in that higher space,
Mhm.
right, there's a more empowered, enlightened way that I'm making my way in the world, but I have to be secure in
Mhm.
who I am,
Yep.
and then also have language to understand the people around me so that I can keep that security, right? Because I'm an Enneagram 9 and a peacemaker. And so
Mhm.
I don't like conflict.
Mhm.
Now, I will enter into conflict,
Mhm.
um, but I don't enjoy it.
Mhm.
And so there might be some things that I don't speak up at in the moment that might make you think I'm really going along with that. This is who I am. I totally agree with you. When reality, I don't. I'm still working it out inside myself. But
Mhm.
then when I am empowered to know, yes, I do know what I believe about this, and I do know how this plays out, then I can take my rightful place in being a peacemaker.
Right.
Um, so there's just a lot of, there's so much depth
Hmm. Hmm.
in it. But again, when you first started talking about story, um, I believe that you were wired a certain way.
Hmm.
I believe that God made me an Enneagram 9.
Hmm.
I don't believe that it was my surroundings. Okay.
Hmm.
And it is my belief that over time, some of those things maybe got the volume turned up on or turned down on, but it really is who I am. Um, from my original wiring. But underneath that is we tend to pile on our personality,
Hmm.
and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And, you know, I may have said something a minute ago and I want to correct it. I'm not saying that who I am is a 9. I was just wired to see the world that way.
Right. Okay.
But once I understand my wiring, then I can really get in touch with my true self that's
Hmm.
underneath that. And so my true self and your true self are very similar, but our wiring is going to make us express that in different ways.
Okay. All right. That's clarity. I like that. And with a lot of talk now that we hear regarding like rewiring, right? And
Hmm.
how we are, I do believe also, God designed us in a certain way. And then he clearly tells us in his word to that we can renew our mind. And I feel like some of the rewiring that people talk about currently, maybe that is whenever we have, as you talked about, the personality develops, or maybe just sin, things that, are going on around us kind of have an impact on that original way that we were created. And then we can kind of get back to his original plan for us, if that makes sense, at the way I'm putting that out there for you. Maybe you can add a little bit to that for us. Is that how you see that?
I think so. I think when I slow down long enough to really look at, um, examine the lens, it's
Hmm.
on my eye, and then see, does that really line up with who I believe God is, who I believe I am? Again, take captive every thought. But as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And so I think the Enneagram gives you a real quick way to do an inventory,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But then
That's good.
also you've got wings in the Enneagram, you have stress points, strength points. And so as I learn more about who I am, as I learn more about who God made me to be, then the way I make my way as an Enneagram 9 in the world at age 51 does not look like it did when I was 18
Sure.
or 5.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and so I think it's so robust. I didn't stop being an Enneagram 9.
Right.
I just began to let some things fall away that maybe were getting in the way,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yes, that does. I like that wording a lot. That's very good. So, is there, whenever I know you do coaching right now with clients in person and online, and I want to make sure that people know in the show notes they will be able to reach out to you. Do you have anything you want to share with us today, like as far as a topic maybe we haven't covered yet that you would just like to share with the listeners?
Let's see. Honestly, I think um, one of the greatest gifts that coaching provided me, and
Hmm.
then therefore I wanted to provide a space for others, was to wake up to your own life
Yeah.
and really um, take a seat in all that God's doing in your life. And
Mm.
so, and then once you have taken that seat and see it, then you can take an active role
Mm.
in participating in it. And
Yeah.
so I do think that we have been lulled to sleep culturally to believe that joy is just going to happen to
Mm,
you. And
mm,
so if you do all the right things and make all the right choices, and then joy will just be yours. And that isn't true.
mm,
I think joy is a discipline.
mm,
And in this world, um, there's an author that I've loved her fiction work so much, and her name is Catherine Center. And she has a quote that says, "Anger will find you, sorrow will find you, but you must go looking for joy."
oh, mhm,
And again, she writes fiction, but baked into every story is lots of layers of truth. And so that quote stood out to me. And then I started thinking about it. And so the discipline of joy in your own life is something that we have to be taught.
mhm,
We're not just born knowing that, but it is the most rewarding discipline,
mhm.
because it actually, makes turn the volume full up on your life. And so
Yeah.
I love that. So that's really what I like to see in coaching is w- I don't always use the Enneagram, but I often do use the Enneagram, and then looking back at our stories to make some informed conclusions about how we got here, and then how we want to move forward to create a life that really emphasizes the discipline of choosing joy and then being able to receive it.
Mhm,
That's another component.
mhm. I love that. Well, a lot of people say in a very simple way, they say find joy in the journey, right?
Hmm.
You have just described that. It's so much clearer, so much clearer. And I love all that language behind that because I feel like it's just going to be much easier for us to understand and hey, buddy, just 1 second. Okay. Much easier for the listeners to be able to say, oh, wow, that's actually a responsibility of mine to look for that joy and to actually seek it, as the quote was saying, to really go out and find that joy. Is beautiful, Julie.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And just to add to that, I think language really does matter.
Yes, it absolutely
So,
does matter.
I like the word choose, uh,
Yes, yes.
because you're choosing joy, uh,
Hmm.
and you have to choose it every single day.
Yes,
You don't choose it once for the week,
that's right.
once for the month, but
Yeah.
you choose it every single day.
Yes, you surely do. And there's another quote about joy that often comes to me, and that is don't delay joy. If you've ever heard that one. But I think that's the part too, like you were saying, like whenever we wake up to our life, because if we're asleep to our life, we are delaying that joy,
Hmm.
right?
Absolutely. Hmm.
But yet if we wake up to our life, it's going to put us in an active stance where we're going to be seeking it, looking for it, choosing joy in our life. And I love that language so much. Um, And then, you said so much great stuff there. I love it. I was taking notes while I'm interviewing you. A lot of beautiful language there. One of the quotes I've heard you say before too was by Henry Nowen, I believe. Do you remember that quote?
Nowen, Henry Nowen. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And Henry Nouwen says, we don't think our way into a new way of living, but we live our way into a new way of thinking.
Ah, yes. Yes.
And actually, I love his work. I'm not sure where what book that particular statement comes out of. So, but and putting it into my own personal context.
Yes.
Um, we live our way into a new way of thinking, and
Mhm.
that can be both positive and negative, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
when we live our way in autopilot, then we create these constructs in our brain of this is just how the world is,
Yeah.
and it feels like we don't have as much say so in things, and we can kind of think things are happening to us. And there are seasons where I've absolutely done that, and that honestly felt true in the moment,
Mhm.
right? But then when I really started to put into place the choosing joy on purpose,
Mhm. Mhm.
really understanding my wiring, how it gets in the way, and how sometimes it's great,
Yeah.
um, understanding my own story and different milestone events in my life and what I made those mean about
Mhm.
who I am.
Yeah.
So then when I'm really conscious
Mhm.
instead of unconscious about my
Right.
thought.
Right. Mhm.
And when I'm conscious about my thought life, then I actually can live my way into a new way of thinking. And
Mhm.
I think that's how, when in coaching, when you can look around you and see that your relationships are completely different and your experience of your life is completely different and none of the circumstances changed.
That's right.
You
It's an
just live
inside
your
job.
way into a new way of thinking.
That's
Yeah,
right. You exactly lived your way into new way of thinking. It's an inside job. It really is.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Peace and contentment is an inside job.
Inside job. Yeah. I love that. Well, I just thank you so much for sharing all this wonderful wisdom with us today. And I am excited for the listeners to hear all of this. Is there anything you would like to say before we close out?
I appreciate you having me
Oh,
and giving me the opportunity to chat with you. And I just hope a lot of things come out of that
yeah.
for the listeners.
I do too. And you guys all, if you are listening, I just highly encourage you to reach out to Julie because she always, every time I hear her and speak with her, I always have such great wisdom that she shares. And I would encourage you to connect with her. You can do that. It'll be in the show notes below.